Thank you very much. I'm going to speak for a few minutes and then I'll hand over to Christine. As was said in the introduction, I was a member of the Electoral Commission, and for me, therefore, it is particularly gratifying to see so many people here, because I spent the best part of a year working on electoral reform in Jersey, on the Electoral Commission, and it's nice to feel that that wasn't entirely wasted, that some people are interested in it enough to come out on a Friday night and hear the arguments. So I'm very grateful to you. When I joined the Electoral Commission, I was charged with examining the issues around reform in an impartial and unbiased way, and that was one of the criteria for being selected to appear on the Commission. And I hope I approached it in that spirit. But obviously, as time went on through the Commission, we formed a views, and that was obviously the point. There's no point in sitting on a Commission and then not coming to a view about anything. So I thought I wanted to share with people what the conclusions were that I had reached as we drew to a close. And the conclusion I reached was that option A offered by far the best future for the island. And just a few points on why I think that is. I think that the point of electoral reform on this island is to offer hope to the island in the future, going forward. And I was struck when we were on the Electoral Commission. We had hundreds of written submissions, and a very large number of people came to speak to us. And I was struck by the sense of bitterness, frustration, anger that came from a lot of people as they talked to us about politics on the island. And that's why I think that hope is the thing that I would like to think that electoral reform could achieve, and I think it should be a positive vision looking forward. And that's not to say that we should throw out everything to do with the past, of course, but I do think that what we should be looking at is some hope for the future. And I think that the fundamental criteria for any system that is going to offer that kind of hope is it has to be fair. And I think that the problem with the electoral system that we have at the moment, which has grown up, which is, it was last reformed the end of the Second World War, 1948, is it hasn't moved with the times, and it is now a very unfair system. It privileges certain voters in certain areas of the island over voters in other areas of the island. And I think that's one of the things that lies at the root of the frustration that many people feel with this island's political system, that their voices can't be heard. And in a way, their voices aren't being heard because their votes aren't being counted equally. The parishes have an unequal representation in the states. And I think that is a fundamental defect that has to be corrected. Unfortunately, two options in this referendum do not offer that possibility. Option C keeps the present situation, obviously, and option B, in my view, I'm afraid, makes a bad situation worse. So, the question which I would put, and which has sort of run around in my head ever since I started forming these views in support of option A, is this. If a fundamental problem with the present system is that it is unfair and unequal, how can the solution be to make it more unfair and more unequal? And I think the people who support option B have to answer this question. What have you got to say to the people of St. Brelade, St. Helier, St. Clement, St. Saviour, those parishes which are actually massively underrepresented at the moment in the States? What have you got to say to those people to answer the question, why should our votes count for even less in the future under option B than they count now? And I think that really goes to the nub of the thing, because the current situation is that the rural parishes, largely because of the fact that they have the constables in the States, have a large and much greater representation in the States than the more populated parishes like this one. I don't think that's fair, and I think that's a fundamental defect in a democratic system. I think it's very corrosive of democracy for people to know that their votes count for less than the votes of people voting in other parts of the island. Sorry, trying to operate one-handed. So I think the great thing about option A is that I think it offers a positive vision for the future. And whenever I've heard people talking about option A, I'm struck by the fact that it seems to me to be offering a positive vision for the future. And I think that's, and it offers that for several reasons. One, for the obvious reason to do with fairness and equality, but I think it also, because it shakes up the system, and it creates these large electoral districts, which I know not everybody is in favour of, but I think are a positive factor, and we'll maybe deal with that in questions later on. But I think what that means is that every single seat will be contested. That's good for democracy, and it's also good because I think it will encourage lots of people to stand who might not stand now. I think it's much harder to challenge people in a seat where maybe one person has held that seat for a long time. You know, it's much harder to stand up and fight for them. But if you know that this is a large electoral district with lots of candidates, much easier to challenge, I think. So I think that option A offers the best chance to reinvigorate politics on the island and provide a strong foundation for the future. And I think there's one thing which I wanted to finish on, which is this idea of preserving the best of the past and moving forward with change as well. And it's a famous quote from a film, some of you may know it. It's from a film called The Leopard. And it says, if we want things to stay as they are, things will have to change. And I think that's actually quite fundamental to this island. I think if you really want to preserve the parish system, if you really want to preserve what's best about the island, you have to have a democratic system which everybody believes in because they know they have the same stake.
I'm a committed Option A voter.
And what's your name, sir?
My name is Graham Prowse. A committed Option A voter, and therefore I'd like to confine my remarks to the constables. The last major reform of the states was in 1947, when the jurats and rectors were out and senators came in, but for longer periods than other members. The constables have always claimed to represent the parishes, but then so did the parish deputies. Many of both representatives, constables and deputies, were elected without contested candidature. How many electors of constables voted for them because they thought they would make good states members as opposed to mayor of the parish? Today the constables are paid $43,000 for their states work, not for their parochial work. Both the previous and current St Brelard's constables couldn't apparently cope with the workload, and in 1956, some 57 years after the initial reform of the state, and during that period the constables have made little contribution of value to state's business. Indeed, many were a laughing stock for their inability to be articulate, and in some cases even their intellect was questioned. And it's time for Jersey's government to do better. The islands deserve it.
Thank you.
On the question of the constables, I have actually great respect for the constables and the work they do, and I think they should continue to do that work in the parishes, and I think that this will strengthen them in doing that. The question of why does Option A feel the constables have no mandate? Yes, well, they do have a mandate. They have a mandate to run their parishes, in my view. And I think that's a job which they do very, very well. And I think that when people vote for them, most people, not all, but most people, I think, vote for constables on the basis that they can do a great job for their parish. And it's a byproduct of that they then end up in the States. I think that the parish system will be strengthened if they are working only in the parishes.